It was one of the most sinister crimes ever committed in British Columbia. The investigation begins in the cold, powerful waters of the Fraser River near Vancouver and ends in a crack house that is as well known to police as it is to the addicts and sex trade workers who gather there. The resulting trial will be one of the most difficult ever held in the province. In 2001, RCMP Detective Peter Cross is the lead investigator assigned to a particularly mysterious case, what is commonly referred to as a John Doe homicide.
We had some information that somebody had been killed inside a house in the north part of Surrey.
On May 12th, 2001, an individual came forward to the police, and he wasn't an informant, he was a witness, and he spoke of having viewed not a person being killed, but the aftermath of such.
We were investigating that, even though we had no idea who the victim was. There was pretty good information.
The house where John Doe was reported to have died is located in Whalley, a low-income neighborhood in Surrey. It's a rundown area and has a high level of crime and violence because of the number of drug addicts who continue to feed their habit. The investigators decide to request a warrant to search the house.
When we searched the house originally, we did it in such a way as the occupants of the house didn't necessarily know what we were looking for.
While conducting the search, the investigators make some gruesome discoveries. Peter Cross dubs it the House of Horrors.
The reason it became termed the House of Horrors is that we eventually did search warrants on the residence, on 2 different occasions, actually. And on one occasion, we went in and looked for fingerprints, for blood, for anything along those lines. And some of those, the blood impressions were pretty graphic because one was a palm print, on a floorboard in blood. So you know that this is not something that's the result of somebody using needles or something. It's something that's the result of a crime.
The house is a disaster and should be demolished.
Inside it was totally shabby and run down.
There's food everywhere, there's garbage everywhere, there's property everywhere. Filthy clothes and cigarette butts and empty alcohol bottles and cans and drug paraphernalia, and it's filthy.
We found piles and piles of new clothes with tags on them, so obviously they're stealing the clothes in exchange for the dope. It was what normally you'd encounter in what they call the crack shack.
There were a number of drug users in the residence at the time, as well as the tenant and some of his associates.
According to police, the tenant, Joe Lagasse, was the person running the house and dealing the drugs. Some people come forward with disturbing information.
They were telling horrendous stories about the torture, where if they didn't come up with the $25 or $50 they needed, that they would get their hair cut, or they get a finger broken, or they'd be made to have sex with other people in the house. I've been on the job 30 years, so you see a lot of violence. I think the concentrated form of this violence in this one house to what these sex trade workers were going through, it's the kind of file that sticks with you because of that, and the level of violence for such little money.
When you combine that with the information that we're getting from all these people on the street about how people are being beaten and tortured in that residence, it kind of gives you a good picture of what might be happening.
One of the women at the house during the search offers some particularly troubling information to the investigators.
She was a heroin addict, very down and out, and in the midst of her interview, she broke down and she finally told us, I know about the homicide, and started referring to the victim as a she as opposed to a he. And That kind of cued everybody in that something else was going on here, and we felt that she was reliable. She had a lot of good information.
The woman said she was at the house a few weeks earlier when a girl was being tortured in the bathtub.
She actually walked in to use the bathroom when this was going on. So that was the main tie-in, the primary evidence that we had at that time.
Because of her confession, a number of other drug addicts overcome their fear and come forward with their own information about the incident.
These people were all really scared. Talking to the police in that world is not looked upon fondly, and they all feel very endangered by it. So it was a struggle to get any information from anybody, but that's predominantly how we started understanding that at least one other person had been killed there.
And we were about 2 or 3 weeks into that investigation when the body floated up in New Westminster.
In June of 2001, a passerby discovers a body floating by the dock in New Westminster Quay, a city near Vancouver. He alerts the police immediately. Forensic Identification Officer Fred Ralston is dispatched to the scene.
It was on June 4th, 2001. I was working a day shift and I just got a phone call that they had recovered a body in the Fraser River, and they just wanted us to come down there and take some photographs before they had taken her out of the river. There were a number of police officers there at the scene, and I noted that there was a body in the river, and it was face down, but it was fairly obvious just from the general outline of the person that it appeared to be female.
Facial features and all those kinds of things are definitely blurred. Of course, water being the most difficult body to find as far as a forensic, because water destroys and animal life destroys what you have fairly quickly.
The current is very strong. The rescuers must work quickly so that the body is not carried away by the river.
Our first concern was to try to get her out of the water without disturbing the body, and more importantly, not letting her go and head down the Fraser River again. So after some discussion, we decided that the dive team from the RCMP would come there and retrieve the body.
The New Westminster Police Department doesn't have its own dive team. The RCMP divers must be brought in.
The feet and hands were bound together. Quite frankly, that's suspicious enough for us to call in homicide. Generally speaking, you don't get anybody trying to commit suicide or trying to drown themselves with their feet and hands tied together. So it was evident to us that this was in fact a homicide, and we had to be very careful in the extraction of the body. We bagged the body in the water. That way we'll preserve things like paper falling out of pockets or perhaps an earring. And then we cut little slits in the bag and let the water rush out that way. The idea, of course, is to get the water out of the bag because water weighs, an awful lot, but it drains in such a way that we can preserve items that might fall out. In this particular case, you want to double that up with a Stokes stretcher so that you can actually control the amount of water that comes out of the bag at any given time. Once the body's up on dry land, it's almost immediately turned over to the homicide investigators.
Detective Constable Meaden and myself, we went down, followed the body down to the Royal Columbian Hospital morgue, and we went in there for obvious reasons, just to see if there was a wallet or anything on her that would tell us who she was.
Many questions remain unanswered. How did the victim end up in the Fraser River? How long has the body been in the water? Will an autopsy be able to determine the victim's identity?